townspeople to come by the Board of Health to hear about the CrossConnection program that the town has embarked on. And we're going to have it a very informal meeting. We have some good speakers to describe what this all means, and a lovely slideshow that will explain the different aspects of it. And we have a speaker, Christine Millhouse from the DEP, and Joe Heights from he's the contractor that the water department has hired. The Board of Health is sponsoring this along with the water department and the plumbing department. The water supply system in a town is very similar to the circulation system you have in your body. It needs to be tight. It needs not to have any leaks or not to have any openings that can introduce materials that might adversely affect others in the town. So it's an important state law that's been around for many years, and there are good regulations. And I'd like to introduce Christine to describe her regulations.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I have 30 years plus experience operating and managing water supply systems. I recently retired from full-time work and took a position with an organization called New EPIC, which is a nonprofit organization that enters into contracts with DEP to provide some technical assistance. So I am here representing DEP tonight. And if you have any questions, I'd like to get through my presentation, and then we'll be happy to take any questions that you have. And so the presentation was put together by a gentleman named Otavio Di Paolo Santos. He has been with the state for many, many years, and he is the authority on cross-connection and cross-connection control in the state of Massachusetts. So this is his presentation. I hope I do it justice. I want you to know that the cross-connection program is all about public health. Controlling cross-connections is a huge, it's very important to DEP. It's a program that is very near and dear to Otavio and to the director, who is Yvette DePisa. She's the director of the drinking water program in DEP. And this is very near and dear to her heart, as is mine. Something stopped working. And hopefully my voice doesn't give out. I taught for 3 hours this morning, and I'm not a trained teacher. So I'm going to be kind of casual about the slides. Hopefully the slides will all cover the outline that has been put together here. I'll introduce things. I will talk about the regulations and talk about the different devices. So first off, what actually is a cross-connection? And a cross-connection is an actual or potential connection between a potable water supply line and a system or a fixture that carries non-potable substances. And of course, potable means drinkable. There are two basic types of cross-connections. A direct cross-connection is when it's a physical piping between a non-potable liquid or gas and the public water supply. A direct connection can be very subject to a condition called back pressure. An indirect cross-connection is not subject to back pressure. It's subject to back siphonage, It's an example of it as a hose lying in a sink. So that is another slide just emphasizing the two different types of cross connections. So this is the most common form of cross connection. Hoses in buckets in your yard. You've got fertilizer in your buckets, you drop the hose into it, and a condition happens out in the distribution system, dropping the pressure, and you back siphon that fertilizer or that car wash liquid right into the potable water supply. So there is a protection for it. You need to have a hose bib vacuum breaker on the threaded outlet. So what's the big deal? Why are cross connections a problem? Cross connections are a problem because they can be a severe health hazard. Normally, under normal conditions, we've got a continuous pressure in our distribution system. It's keeping the water flowing in the correct direction. But there are things that can change that. The two conditions are back pressure and back siphonage. If you have something in your building that's causing a pressure to overcome the pressure of the drinking water supply, that chemical, that liquid that you have in your building is going to enter into the distribution system. And back siphonage is a condition where the pressure in the distribution system drops below the pressure, normal pressure, and causes a vacuum and siphons the material into the drinking water supply. So this is a little graphic showing the difference between the back siphonage and back pressure. In the situation on the left, you've got a water supply pressure of about 60 psi, and if something in your building is pumping at a pressure of 80 psi, it's going to overcome the 60 psi in the supply and enter into the drinking water supply. So again, I'm repeating this because it is something we really want to emphasize with residents and homeowners, that this is the most common form of cross connection. So water main breaks are one of the big incidents that can happen that can cause the pressure in the distribution system to fall below the pressure in within a residence or an industry or a commercial building. When you have a water main break, pressure drops, flow reverses. You can get cross-contamination if you don't have proper protection. So this is an example of back siphonage, a water main break, or undersized plumbing systems, high withdrawal rates due to fires. It will all cause the pressure in your distribution system to drop below the normal pressures. In this particular example, they're showing a chemical company with a chemical mixing tank. And if it's not protected and you have a main break, it can pull that chemical out of the tank, reverse it, and bring it into the distribution system. So there are different types of hazards with backflow. You can have pollutants, which they consider as low hazard. These are going to be things that are going to affect the color, they're going to affect the taste, but they may not be high health hazards. But the category of contaminants would be considered high health hazards. You can have biological, chemical, physical contaminants drawn into the distribution system, and it can cause immediate illness, or you can develop a chronic illness. So now we know what the problem is, so how do we go about protecting our water supply? Regulations. We have regulations and they're here to help us. So the first regulations that came into being that gave water suppliers the ability and the responsibility to protect the water supply was the Safe Drinking Water Act that went into effect in 1974. And it gives the water suppliers a responsibility to protect the water supply, but also gave you regulations to be able to do what you need to do. Mass general laws adopted, this is the part from the public health laws, allowing cross-connection programs and prohibiting physical cross-connections in the water supply. So, do we allow cross-connections? The goal of the program is to eliminate as many cross-connections as absolutely feasible. Obviously, you have to allow industries to function, and so there are cross-connections that are allowed. And cross-connections then must be protected by an approved backflow preventer. So what about private wells? Lots of people want to have a private well and a city water system so that they can use the well when the well has supply, save on their water rates, but connections between private wells and public water supplies are prohibited. 310 CMR 22 are these mass DEP drinking water regulations, and this is the citation that prohibits the connection between private wells and public water supplies. So again, 310 CMR 22.22 are the cross-connection regulations. And cross-connection regulations give us the responsibility of preventing contamination to the drinking water all the way to the last free-flowing tap. So this is more of the cross-connection regulations from DEP. And it really puts a burden on water suppliers to run a cross-connection program so that we can protect the water supply. Again, it's all about public health. So this also gives water suppliers the authority to enforce the regulations so that if people have unapproved cross connections, you can find them. So there are a lot of people who have, a lot of players in the cross connection program, all having different responsibilities. The main responsibility of the public water system is to develop the plan, develop the program. Since 1994, public water suppliers have been required to have a cross-connection program. So what is a cross-connection program? It's a comprehensive distribution protection program preventing the contamination to the last free-flowing outlet or consumer tap. So who's responsible for the components? Obviously, the public water supplier is responsible for a portion of the program. But you also have the owner of the building, the owner of the device has certain responsibilities that they have to, that they're required to perform by the regulations. There are requirements for a certified backflow device tester. And They must be certified by the state of Massachusetts in order to be a device tester. Your local plumbing inspector gets involved, and so you want to have good cooperation between all of these entities. Make sure that you've got your local plumbing inspector involved in all aspects of the program so they know exactly what your intent is, what your regulations are, and what their role is. So the public water supplier has to develop a plan. And the plan is actually a written document containing various components. Massachusetts has created a form for making sure that your program meets all of the different aspects. And you have to fill out the form and make it part of your plan. But the other responsibility for public water suppliers is that they have to go out and survey all of the buildings to locate any cross connections and to make sure that those cross connections are either eliminated or protected. In order to do the surveys, you have to also be certified by the state of Massachusetts. And the surveys can be rather difficult. Depending on the size and the age of the building and the different uses it's gone through, the plumbing can go all different directions within the building, and you have to start at the entry of the building, follow the pipes all the way through, make sure that you find the end of each one of them, and determine if there are any cross connections anywhere along the line. Public water supplier is responsible for the documentation. There are survey documents, there are testing documents, there are letters that you have to send if the people haven't complied, violation notices. All of these things have to be kept. There are various time frames on keeping the different documentation. Minimum 7 years on the testing documentation. Some of the survey and all the other correspondence you have to maintain permanently. Public water suppliers also responsible for enforcement. Enforcement is never fun. It's always better if you can get people to cooperate, but enforcement is a necessary part of this. You need to make sure that you are equipped to levy fines, that you're prepared to terminate water service in situations where there are really high hazards or health concerns. You have to let the public know that you have a plan. And I guess that's what we're doing here tonight, is letting people know that you are putting together a program and a plan. You're responsible for reviewing all of the design data sheets when a new installation is going in, or if you're requiring a device to be replaced. You're responsible for reviewing the design sheets and making sure that the device is appropriate for that location and that hazard. So this is another listing of the water system responsibilities. All of your documentation has to be approved by DEP. Ottavio and I don't know that Ottavio has any staff, but it all must be approved by Ottavio or his staff. And I know one of the responsibilities is to have a local ordinance, bylaws, or regulations, which I believe you are implementing. One last point on that slide was having the right of entry. It's always good to have something in your regulations or your town bylaws somewhere that give you the right of entry. And DEP regulations allow you and, in fact, encourage you to put that into your bylaws because you need to be able to get into these places. So your written plan has several things that it has to include. You need a description of the program. You need to put in writing what your staffing is going to be. Who's going to manage the program? Who's going to do the testing? Who's going to keep the documentation? All of that needs to be in your plan. The tracking. How are you going to go about tracking all of the devices? Are you going to use a software program? Are you going to have a manual card system? All of those are acceptable, but you must tell DEP how you're going to track all the devices. Who's going to do the surveying of the buildings, and how are you going to document the surveying of the buildings? Who's going to do the testing? Who's going to do the training? You need to have your staff trained to understand the program, to be able to field phone calls. And what are the fee requirements going to be? It's fully appropriate in DEP's mind to charge fees for your services, to charge fees for the review of the design data sheets, the testing, the surveying. DEP encourages towns to support the program through a fee-based structure. So you've got the water supplier doing that portion of it. What are the owner's responsibilities? And the owners have to notify the public water supplier that they have a device. And they have to comply with all of your permit programs and necessary approvals. They have to accommodate your surveyor or your tester. You need to cooperate with them in terms of the timing of the device, but it should be and can be done during normal business hours. You need someone to accompany the surveyor because as an owner, you know the building the best. It's the owner's responsibility to maintain a spare parts kit. That water suppliers can't be expected to have a supply of spare parts kits. So that is the owner's responsibility, and it needs to be on hand so that if the device fails, it can be repaired very quickly. And the owner needs to get the device fixed within 14 days. And obviously, the town, if they feel that there is some significant risk to the public health, they can terminate the water supply until that device is repaired. But generally, you give them 14 days to get it repaired. And again, the owner also has to maintain records. They have to maintain the testing records for 7 years. All of the other documentation they have to maintain for the life of the device. So you have a backflow tester. What is the tester's responsibilities? They have to have a test kit. And that test kit has to be properly maintained, and it should be calibrated annually. They have to record the test for each inspection that they do and submit copies to the public water supplier and to the owner within 30 days. And they also should maintain copies of the results for 7 years. Plumbing inspector gets involved with this also. Plumbing inspectors their responsibility is to make sure that all water supply systems are designed and that the devices are installed in a manner such that it prevents the contamination of the water supply. Plumbing inspector should not issue a permit for the plumbing work until the public water supplier has approved the backflow device. There's a national plumbing code which gives the plumbing inspector his authority and responsibilities in the cross-connection program. More in the plumbing code. So there are a couple of strategies for backflow protection. One of them is called external protection or service containment. That protects the town from whatever is in the building. So that would mean that the backflow preventer is at the meter. Internal protection or point of use protects the customers within the building. You can put a backflow preventer at the meter and protect the community from what's going on if there's a backflow incident in that resident or in that commercial building. But what about the people that are working in the building? The device at the meter would not protect them, and so you need to have a device at the point of the cross connection. So there are various types of backflow protection. I'll get it one of these times. An air gap separation is the number one best and most efficient backflow protection. Backflow preventers are mechanical devices. They can have spring-loaded check valves, or there are some without spring-loaded check valves. Some are testable and some are non-testable. So this is a graphic picture of various types. The diagram in the center shows an air gap. It's a physical break between the water supply and the containment where the contaminant would be. You've got in the bottom right-hand corner the reduced pressure zone backflow preventer. That's a high hazard device. You would use that whenever you feel that there is a real health risk to the system. Double checks, you have less of a hazard. You can use a double check. And the pressure vacuum breaker and atmospheric vacuum breakers are generally found on local taps at your sinks. So the air gap, again, is the best protection. There are requirements for an air gap. The distance between the lowest point of the pipe and the receiving vessel has to be 2 times the diameter of the inside of the pipe, but no less than 1 inch. So here's some pictures. This is the red arrow shows the gap between the sink and the dish sink spray arm. You don't want that dish sink spray arm hanging down into the sink. There's some more pictures of typical air gaps. These are on waste lines. So this is the device, the hose bib vacuum breaker, that needs to be on all of our outside faucets. It will protect anything that you're doing with your garden hose from being sucked back into the distribution system in the event of a low pressure incident in the system. Typical indoor application are the janitor sinks in the washrooms. Janitor sinks are often places where they will attach a hose to it and leave it laying down in the sink. You need to have a hose bib vacuum breaker on that tap. There's a non-testable atmospheric vacuum breaker, another type of device that you would use. It will protect only for back siphonage. These are common on irrigation systems. And here's some other applications for that, often in commercial kitchens. So this is an interesting one, a dual check with an atmospheric vent that's meant for carbonated beverage machines. Most of the machines are coming with these as a part of the machine, but you want to make sure that they have one, and you can see that you have to look closely for them. They're not large devices, but all machines should have them. Dual check with an intermediate atmospheric vent. Also for kitchen type appliances, the coffee machines. And this is a dual check for residents. Some communities put these devices in, they mandate that they go in just past the meter. This will protect the city's supply or the town's supply from anything within the house. They will not protect the people in the house from any incidents that happen within the house. But that's a typical application for it right after the meter. So a lot of commercial places now have these chemical dispensers, and the chemical dispensers must have a dual check with an atmospheric vent in Massachusetts. Some of these chemical dispensers have what's called an E-gap, and you cannot trust just the E-gap. In Massachusetts, you must have the dual check. There's a diagram of the proper installation for the chemical dispensers. This is a testable type device. It's often used in irrigation systems, but it's only going to protect against back siphonage. This is a little bit more of a sophisticated, spill-resistant pressure vacuum breaker. And there's an application of an installation for the spill-resistant device. Another testable backflow preventer is the double check assembly. The high hazard devices have to be tested twice a year. Double check assemblies must be tested once a year by the certified tester. There's a typical application of a double check valve assembly. This is the reduced pressure device. This is the high hazard device. When you have a backflow incident, the flow gets reversed and it is dumped out onto the floor instead of being allowed back into the city's system or the town's system. Again, these are high hazard devices. You would use these in sewage treatment plants, hospitals, mortuaries, any place where you're going to have some concern of a really high health hazard. So this is an installation that on a commercial dishwashing machine, one of the things that your plan should include are specifications for installation of these devices, because your tester has to be able to get to them to test. That looks like that's pretty tight quarters for someone to be able to get in there and properly test the device. So these are some actual pictures of things that people have found out there. Ottavio calls these the cross-connection horrors, and they're just examples of why we need the devices. Part of it is a lack of education on for people. They don't know better. They don't realize the hazard. So public education is a component of your program. And these are the kinds of things that you want to encourage people not to do. So again, we're all responsible for this program. And that kind of concludes the presentation, and I can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Christine. We have a question.
Yes, we have a question.
Speak loudly so we can.
Speak loudly, I will. I have automatic animal waterers and a frost-free hydrant installed by licensed plumbers, devices that are manufactured for that purpose. How do I know where any backflow preventer is on those items?
And I didn't see here what is the device?
Automatic animal waterer?
I'm sorry,
It's an automatic animal waterer.
automatic animal water.
Put water in your cat or dog's bowl without you needing to be home at all?
Okay. It's in the barn.
Okay, so now are you a private residence or are you like on a farm? Okay, do those alpaca water lines, do they go directly into the bowl or did you happen to notice?
There's an air gap between the water.
Perfect. That's exactly what we'd be looking for. So like Christine said, as long as let's say you had a 1-inch water line going to your alpaca bowl, as long as that air gap was at least 1 inch, then you would be covered. There's no way that water, even if we had back siphonage, could jump from the bowl.
No, but it does occasionally overfill if you don't watch them. They do overfill sometimes, but I think the gap is still, it wouldn't be probably legit, but I think the gap is still, ends up being.
Yeah, just barely.
You have to watch, occasionally they malfunction and they.
Okay.
Overflow.
Then in that case, you might just want to have your plumber come out and make sure that air gap is adequate. He might just have to, and they might just have to,
Be monitoring and making sure it doesn't overflow.
yeah, you might just have to cut a little bit of that pipe off so that the pipe under no circumstances would be below the flood rim of your alpaca's bowl, if you follow me,
No, it pours out.
and onto the ground, right? And there's still that gap between the flood rim of your bowl and
It
your,
might be, less than ideal, but there always is a gap.
But you need to measure
I will
that
measure.
1 inch from the flood rim.
Okay.
And the highest point that can overflow,
I suspect
it needs to be an inch from there.
Yeah.
if it were to be, I don't think you would have a 2-inch line. That would be relatively big for your alpaca's bowl, but okay, so like she said, it would have to be twice the diameter of the water line feeding it.
Right. And then the frost-free hydrant,
Could you describe that in more detail as to what exactly that is? A frost-free hydrant?
it's connected below the frost line, underground. It's got a gate valve that's, 6 feet down?
So that basically you can use water all winter long without it freezing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's basically a hose line that's,
Okay, then the source of that,
has a gate valve that's way down.
and that's not directly from the city, that's past your water meter, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it comes out of the house.
Okay, so it is downstream of your water meter. It's not, okay. Then really on that, if you had a threaded outlet, you would just want to have one of those hose bib vacuum breakers that was described. You can buy those at Home Depot or your plumbing supply house for probably $5 or $10. You would just screw that into your threaded outlet, then put your, I'm sorry, what was the name of the system?
It's a frost-free hydrant.
the frost-free hydrant, you would screw that into your hose bib vacuum breaker, and then you can use that for whatever application you would like, and there's no way you could pull back any dirty water, contaminated water through that system into your home with that little hose bib vacuum breaker.
So it's my responsibility to get this.
Yep, and like I said, those are right on the shelf at any plumbing supply house or your Home Depot, FW Web.
Other hose bibs around the house, but
Yep, anywhere you've got a hose that could potentially become an unprotected cross connection, so you would want to screw that little device in, and then you're free to make your ice cubes and brush your teeth and know that you're protected. So,
okay. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something down 6 feet that I was supposed to be worried about.
nope.
Okay.
Well, do we have any other questions?
I think you're up next.
Well, our second speaker is Joe. He's our town inspector who's working for the water department now. And Joe Heights, and give us your story.
Yeah, again, my name's Joe Heights. I've been doing the Backflow program for the water department for about 12 years myself, but our company's been doing it for probably close to 20 years. A little background on the program in the real world. Actually, here in Massachusetts, we had one of the very first cross-connection contaminations in 1969 out at Holy Cross College. Basically, the whole football team came down with hepatitis from a drinking water that was connected to an irrigation system that was contaminated by some groundwater or well water. So that's basically what we're trying to do in the town, is make sure that no groundwater or well water systems that could potentially be connected to the city water contaminate the rest of us. So basically what we're going to do is send out a letter. It'll be coming from Rowley Water Department on the Rowley letterhead, stating we'd like to do a survey of your water system. It shouldn't take more than 15, 20, 30 minutes tops. Appointments will be available normal business hours, weekdays, probably from 8 to 4. Basically all we need to do is come into your property, take a quick look at your water service, your well water, and make sure the two systems are separate. That's basically what we want to do. We don't want any well water to contaminate our fresh, clean city water coming from the drinking plant. Any questions?
Is there any cost to people to have this done?
That would really come from the water department. Mary Beth, do you have any idea what they're going to fee right now for surveys?
Well, we're not, we're incurring the cost for this survey. It's $45 a survey, what was it?
From me to the town?
Yeah, what was it?
I don't think it was quite that much. I'd have to look, but I think it was maybe 35, 40, but okay. But that would basically be the cost passed along to the customer, exactly what the contractor, me, would be charging the town?
At this time, there'll be no cost to the customer.
Okay,
The water department will bear the cost for the initial surveys to get the program running. Those residents that will be subject to annual inspections at that point will have to incur the cost from there.
Why don't you repeat that with the microphone, just so we get it on the camera? It's a long ways from
any cost that would be for the survey would be taken care of by the water department first time around. After that, there could potentially be a $30 fee annually for basically just coming out and resurveying your system, make sure no changes have been made, make sure nothing's been updated in the plumbing that might connect the well water and your city water or town water.
Certification?
Yeah, basically just us coming back out, making sure that the plumbing system hasn't changed, nobody's added a new pipe basically going from your well water to your town water. We'll just document that in writing that we have checked it off, and that'll basically be your annual inspection. Anybody else?
Any other questions? Well, Joe, thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Does anybody have any questions for Christine or Joe? Well, thank you very much for coming. I hope it's been helpful. We've had wonderful information, and thank you very much. Very good.